The door clicks shut, a gentle exhale. The world is finally muted. You tell yourself, this is peace, this is control, a necessary retreat into the quiet harbor of the self. But a harbor is not the ocean. A fortress built stone by stone for protection can just as easily become a prison. The silence, once a comfort, begins to echo. The stillness, once sought, becomes stagnant. Days blur into a seamless gray watercolor, and the face in the mirror becomes a stranger. This is the paradox of retreat. The self-imposed exile that begins as a shield, only to reveal in the long, hollow quiet its own dark side. The echo in the room, it begins as a whisper, a deliberate choice, the click of the lock, the drawing of the curtains, the conscious decision to dim the volume of the outside world. At first, this chosen silence feels like a sanctuary. It is a soft landing after a long fall. The noise of expectation, the friction of social engagement, the simple, grinding weight of performing a self for others, it all recedes. You can finally hear yourself think, or so you tell yourself. The first few days are pure relief, a long, slow exhale that seems to last for hours. The nervous system, frayed and overstimulated, begins to quiet down. The quiet is a balm. It is a wide, open space. But space, when left empty for too long, does not remain neutral. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the quality of the silence changes. The restorative quiet, once a gentle hum, calcifies. It becomes something denser, heavier. The silence is no longer an absence of noise. It is a presence, an active, encompassing thing. This is the echo. It is the sound of a question not asked, the vibration of a text message never sent, the hollow where a laugh should be. The room, which once felt like a protective shell, now feels like a sealed vessel. And the only thing inside is the sound of your own solitude, magnified. You notice it in the small things. The light lands differently. It seems to hit the surfaces of the room and stop, unable to bounce, unable to fill the space with life. Colors appear muted, as if a thin layer of dust has settled over everything. The vibrant red of a book cover is just red. The green of a plant in the corner is just green. The world loses its nuance, its texture. It becomes flat. This is the emotional atrophy of self-imposed isolation. It is a slow fade, a desaturation. Connection is what gives the world its depth, its color. It is the friction that proves we are real. Without it, the edges of the self begin to blur. You look in the mirror. The face is familiar but distant, a portrait. You find yourself performing small tasks with a strange detachment, as if watching someone else move through the motions, making coffee, reading a page, staring out the window. The person you are when you are alone is not the same person who is reflected back by others. Without that reflection, the sense of self begins to untether. The loneliness that arrives is not the sharp, aching loneliness of missing someone specific. It is a dull, atmospheric pressure, a profound subterranean emptiness. It is the realization that the fortress you built to keep the world out has also locked you in. The peace you sought has been replaced by quiet, pervasive dread. The fear that if you were to call out, the only thing that would answer is the echo of your own voice, returning from the walls you so carefully constructed. This is the first cold recognition. The sanctuary has become the void, and the quiet, once a choice, now feels like a consequence. Building the fortress. No one builds a fortress in a time of peace. These walls, this space of retreat, it does not rise from nothing. It is not built by chance. It is constructed stone by stone with deliberate, often unconscious intention. Each stone is a reason, each locked door a memory. The retreat begins long before the door is shut. It begins with an injury. Perhaps it was a wound, a small, sharp betrayal, or a slow, dull ache of not being seen. The world, in its casual indifference or its point of cruelty, teaches a hard lesson. Vulnerability is a liability. Connection is a risk. To be open is to be in danger. And so, the first stone is laid. A small withdrawal, a conversation avoided, an invitation declined. It feels better. It feels safer. The immediate threat is gone. This act of self-preservation is logged in the mind as a success. When I retreated, the pain stopped. This is the logic of the fortress. It is a defense mechanism born of a genuine need for safety. For many, the world is simply too loud. It is a tidal wave of stimulus, of expectation, of noise. For the sensitive soul, the introvert, or the person burned out by the sheer velocity of modern life, the world does not just ask for participation, it demands it. It pulls and prods and shouts. Retreat, then, is not an act of aggression. It is an act of desperation. It is a search for quiet in a world that will not stop talking. It is the only way to find a patch of shade in a relentless blazing sun. The isolation is a foreman, a deep, cellular need to simply be without the exhausting performance of being for others. The fortress is a soundproof room. For others, the walls are built to hold back the weight of expectation, the pressure to be successful, to be happy, to be on. The self presented to the world becomes a heavy mask, and isolation is the only place where that mask can finally be set down. It is a rebellion against the gaze of others, a quiet, passive refusal to play the game. Here, in the fortress, there are no roles to play, no one to disappoint, no one to please. The tragedy, of course, is that defense mechanisms are not designed for nuance. They are hammers, and they see every interaction as a nail. They are designed for survival, not for growth. The fortress does its job perfectly. It keeps out the pain. It mutes the noise. It blocks the demanding gaze. But it is indiscriminate. It does not know how to filter. It cannot distinguish between a threat and an offering. It cannot tell the difference between a critical voice and a loving one. The walls that keep out the arrows also keep out the warmth. The moat that drowns the invaders also blocks the messengers of grace. The fortress, built to protect the soft, vulnerable self within, ends up starving it. It isolates the very part of you it was meant to defend. The builder becomes the prisoner. The reasons for the walls were valid, solid, and heavy. They were bricks of real experience, but the builder forgets that the danger has passed, the war is over, the noise has quieted, and they are still standing watch, alone, inside a fortress that has become a monument to a pain that is no longer there, guarding a self that is no longer in danger, only in shadow. The biology of detachment. The human mind is not designed for a vacuum. It is a social organ shaped by millennia of interplay, reflection, and co-regulation. We are wired to attune to others, to see a smile and feel a flicker of it in our own muscles, to hear a tone of voice and have our nervous system instantly respond. When you remove this input, the mind does not simply go quiet. It begins to change. This is the biology of detachment. It is not a failure of character, it is a predictable, physiological response. In the silence of the fortress, the brain's chemistry begins to shift. The neurochemicals that reward social interaction, the dopamine hit from a shared laugh, the flood of oxytocin from a meaningful touch, or a deep conversation, are no longer being produced at the same rate. These are the chemicals that make the world feel bright, meaningful, and safe. Without them, the baseline of experience shifts downward. Life doesn't just feel flatter. The neurochemical palette used to paint joy, motivation, and belonging has been thinned. This is the physiological root of the grayness, the desaturation of the world. At the same time, the brain begins a process of efficient, ruthless adaptation. It operates on a use it or lose it principle. The complex neural pathways that govern social skills, the very ones that allow you to read micro-expressions, to interpret tone, to feel empathy, to navigate the subtle dance of conversation, are like muscles. When left unused, they begin to atrophy. This is emotional pruning. The brain, sensing that these pathways are knocked or even necessary for survival in this new isolated environment, begins to dismantle them. It reallocates those resources elsewhere, often to the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for self-reflection, rumination, and thinking about the past and future. This is why, in isolation, the mind often turns inward in a corrosive way. The external world fades, and the internal world becomes disproportionately, menacingly loud. The silence is filled with the echoes of old regrets and new anxieties. The brain, with its social pathways weakening, becomes less adept at perspective-taking even with itself. Meanwhile, the nervous system enters a state of profound confusion. In the company of safe others, our nervous systems co-regulate. We unconsciously sync our breathing, our heart rates, our emotional states. This is a biological anchor letting us know we are safe. Alone, the body lacks this anchor. It is unmoored. The nervous system, deprived of its regulatory feedback, can become stuck. It may drift into a state of hypoarousal, the fog, the lethargy, the feeling of being underwater, a profound freeze response. Or it may tip into hyperarousal, a low-grade, constant anxiety. The silence of the room is not calm, it is tense, as the body remains on high alert for a danger that never arrives. This is the deep, physical trap. The very act of isolation reinforces the need for isolation. The brain and body adapt to the absence of connection. Socializing, which was once just tiring, now feels overwhelmingly difficult, foreign, or even terrifying. The detachment is no longer just a feeling. It has become encoded in your biology. Your body has forgotten the language of connection, and your brain is quietly, efficiently deleting the dictionary. The ghosts behind the door. There comes a moment when the emptiness is no longer bearable. It is a quiet, internal pivot. The suffering of the solitude finally outweighs the memory of the suffering that caused it. A small, brave part of the self, starved of light and air, begins to stir. It remembers. It remembers the simple animal warmth of existing in the same space as another, the effortless rhythm of a shared silence, the spark of being understood. The craving is not loud. It is a dull, persistent ache, a thirst. And so you move toward the door that has been closed for so long it has become part of the wall, a forgotten seam in the architecture of your life. But as the hand reaches for the handle, it freezes. A cold, invisible current pushes back. This is the resistance, and it is guarded. The ghosts are not outside the door. They are in the hallway of the mind, patrolling the exits. They are the spectral images of past hurts, the whispering echoes of old criticisms, the formless shadows of future anxieties. One ghost is the fear of judgment. It whispers that you have been gone too long, that you have become strange, awkward, and out of step. They will see the rust you've gathered. They will see how you've forgotten the words, the timing, the dance. They will know you are damaged. Another ghost is the fear of incompetence. The atrophy is real. The social muscles are weak. The prospect of simple conversation feels like running a marathon. The sheer effort of smiling, of listening, of formulating a response seems titanic. It is easier to stay in where the only demand is to breathe. And then the oldest ghost, the most powerful, the fear of the original wound. This ghost holds the memory of why the fortress was built. It reminds you in vivid, sharp detail of the pain of being vulnerable, the cost of trusting, the sting of rejection. It holds up the shield and says, remember? Remember what the world does to the soft in the open? Why would you ever risk that again? These ghosts are powerful, and the mind is their ally. The mind, in its desire to protect you, becomes a master of justification. It builds a beautiful, logical case for staying inside. It tells you this is not isolation. It is introversion. It is a noble, chosen solitude. It tells you this is not loneliness. It is self-sufficiency, a strength. It tells you this is not fear. It is wisdom, a discerning choice to avoid the shallow, draining rituals of society. It tells you this is not hiding. It is healing, a necessary sacred pause. But a pause that never ends is not a pause. It is a stop. This is the true dark side of the retreat, the inner conflict. It is the paralysis of standing in the doorway, caught between two opposing fundamental needs, the biological imperative for connection and the psychological imperative for safety. You are trapped in the liminal space between the prison and the battlefield. The suffering is no longer about the outside world. It is the internal stalemate, the deep, agonizing dissonance of wanting to live, yet being terrified to emerge. The ghosts, once your protectors, have become your jailers. They stand watch, ensuring the door remains closed, and you, in your exhaustion, mistake their presence for your own will. You believe the choice to stay is still yours, not realizing you have become a hostage to the very defenses you created. A crack in the wall. A fortress does not fall in a day. It erodes or it breaks. For the person in the self-imposed prison, the turning point is rarely a logical argument. The ghosts are too clever for logic. The justifications are too well rehearsed. The mind has built a perfect airtight case for its own internment. The turning point is not a decision. It is an impact. It is a moment of pure, undiluted feeling that punches through the muffled silence. It is a crack in the wall of the mind, sudden, sharp, and undeniable. It often comes from an unexpected place, a small, mundane intrusion from the outside world. Perhaps it is a sound. After months of the same predictable indoor noises, the hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the foundation, the sound of one's own breathing, a clear, sharp note from outside cuts through, the unfiltered, joyous laugh of a stranger on the street, a fragment of music from a passing car, a song so familiar it bypasses the brain and strikes the heart directly. It is not a threat. It is just life. And its vibrancy, contrasted with the muted stillness inside, is a shock to the system, or it is a memory unbidden. It rises like a bubble from the deep, a wave of sensory detail so real it is almost a hallucination. The specific, sharp smell of pine needles on a hot day, the rough texture of a stone wall under your fingertips, The feeling of a hand held firmly in yours, the simple animal warmth of it, a sudden visceral recollection of belonging. It arrives with a jolt, a physical ache, a grief so profound it takes the breath away. Or perhaps it is the mirror. You look at the face you have seen every day, but this time the detachment shatters. The face is not just distant, it is unrecognizable. The eyes are hollow, the skin is pale, unused, and a single cold realization lands with the weight of a stone. I have vanished. I am still breathing, but I am gone. This is the moment the cost becomes undeniably catastrophically clear. The intricate algebra of the soul finally solves for X, and the answer is devastating. The safety is revealed as a slow death. The peace is unmasked as a profound, colorless void. The control is just an attachment to an empty room. The story, the carefully constructed narrative that this was necessary, that this was wisdom, that this was self-care, collapses. This is not protection. This is a cage. The fortress was built to keep out the pain, but it has kept out everything. It has kept out life itself. The great, terrible, beautiful, messy, unpredictable flow of existence has been happening all this time on the other side of the wall, and you have been in here, safe and absent. The ghosts are still there. They still whisper, but their words suddenly sound thin, transparent. They are echoes from an old, finished war. A new, more immediate fear is born. The fear of staying, the fear of another year passing in this dim light, the terror of the final irreversible fade, of becoming a permanent ghost in your own home. This realization is not a comfort. It is an agony. It is the cold, sharp pain of waking up in a dark room. But it is the first real thing, the first feeling that is not muffled, not managed, not anesthetized. A single, thin ray of light cuts through the dust of the room. It is sharp. It illuminates the neglect. It shows the space for what it truly is. The hand, which was frozen at the door, is still trembling. It does not reach for the handle, not yet, but it unclenches. The stalemate is broken. The pain of living has, at last, become more compelling than the fear of it. The slow re-entry. The crack in the wall is not a doorway, not yet. It is just an opening, a single painful sliver of light. The realization, so clear and devastating, is followed by a new heavy silence. The ghosts are momentarily stunned, but the body remains bound by the inertia of its prison. The fortress, though its primary purpose is gone, remains. Its gravity is immense. Re-entry is not a single heroic act of walking into the sun. It is a slow, agonizing, and profoundly ungraceful process. It is the ascent of a deep-sea diver who must rise incrementally, pausing to avoid the life-threatening pain of the bends. It is like learning to walk again on limbs that have forgotten their purpose. The first step is a small, terrifying test. Not a conversation, not a party, just an exposure. Opening the curtains all the way at midday, sitting by the open window, letting the unfiltered sounds of the world wash in, the sound of traffic, the distant shout of a child, the breeze carrying a dozen indistinct scents. It all feels abrasive, chemically sharp, painfully loud. The nervous system, so long accustomed to the padded silence, flares in protest. The impulse to retreat, to close the window, is a physical, nauseating force. This is the first trial, to sit with the discomfort, to reacclimate the senses, to tolerate the raw, unmediated sensation of life without fleeing. The next step is to test the ground, a walk, perhaps, at an hour when the world is quiet, dawn or late at night. the air feels different, thinner. The sheer three-dimensional space of the outside world is dizzying, lacking the familiar pressure of the room. The presence of a stranger walking on the other side of the street feels like a static charge. You are acutely, painfully aware of your own form, your own visibility. The mask, the one left by the door for so long, feels heavy and foreign on the face. This is the relearning of coexistence, the simple, silent contract of sharing space. Then, the language. This is the hardest part. The muscles of social engagement are not just weak, they are stiff with disuse. A simple interaction at a grocery store, the hello, the how are you, the mechanics are there, but the music is gone. The voice sounds wrong in your own ears, a pitch too high or too low. The timing of a smile feels off, a fraction of a second too late. You watch the cashier's easy, fluid response and feel a profound sense of alienation, a deep, burning shame. I am a poor imitation of a person. I have forgotten how to be. The fortress beckons. See? The ghosts whisper, their strength returning. It's not safe. It's not worth it. Come back. It is quiet and simple in here. This is the critical juncture, the moment where the re-entry fails or where integration begins. Integration is not the act of destroying the fortress. The need for safety that built it was real, valid, and worthy of honor. That part of the self is not an enemy. It is a loyal guardian who did its job too well. Integration is thanking the guardian and telling it the war is over. It is building a gate in the fortress wall, a gate that can be opened and also closed. It is the slow, painstaking fusion of two fundamental needs, the self that needs sanctuary and the self that needs connection. It is the vulnerability of sending a text message to an old friend, "Are you free?" and the agonizing, suspended in amber wait for a reply. It is the conscious, difficult choice to sit with that vulnerability and not interpret a delayed response as a confirmation of your unworthiness. It is the courage to offer the world the part of you that was wounded and to trust that this time, maybe, it will be held with care. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the world is still sharp, a careless word, a moment of misunderstanding. The old wound aches, the gate swings shut. But the re-entry is not measured by success. It is measured by persistence. It is the act of opening the gate again and again, each time a little easier, each time staying out a little longer. The atrophied limbs slowly regain their strength. The language, halting and broken, begins to find its rhythm. The world, once blindingly bright, resolves into simple, bearable, and sometimes even beautiful daylight. The open window. The fortress is not destroyed. It has simply changed. The high, thick walls, once a seamless, oppressive circle, now have an opening. It is not the drawbridge of a castle, lowered only for battle or defense. It is not the locked door of a prison, a barrier of shame. It is an open window. This is the final, quiet wisdom of the journey. The discovery of the profound, essential difference between the isolation that starves and the solitude that nourishes. Isolation is a wall, solitude is a boundary, isolation is an absence, solitude is a presence. Isolation is the sound of the echo. Solitude is the sound of your own steady breath in a room quiet enough to hear it. The self-imposed isolation was born of fear. It was a turning away from the world, a severance, a desperate attempt to mute the pain. It was a choice made against life. Restorative solitude is a choice made for life. It is a turning toward the self. It is the necessary sacred pause. It is the quiet harbor where the ship can be repaired, the sails mended, the cargo checked, not to stay forever, but to become seaworthy again. It is the act of breathing in so that you have the breath to exhale back into the world. From the open window, the world is visible. The colors are no longer muted. The sounds are no longer a threat. They are just life happening. The distant laugh, the hum of traffic, the bark of a dog, it is a texture, a landscape, a reminder that you are a part of a vast moving current. The breeze comes in. It carries the scent of rain, of cut grass, of the world outside. It is a form of connection that does not demand performance. It does not ask for a mask. There must be compassion for the one who built the fortress. That builder was not a coward. They were a survivor. They were a self, wounded and overwhelmed, doing the only thing it knew how to do to protect its own fragile core. The retreat was a necessary winter. It was a time of deep, frozen stillness, a blunt instrument used to survive an unbearable climate. But spring is not a reward. It is a biological imperative. It takes a primal courage to build a wall against the world. But it takes a deeper, more human courage to find a way to live with the window open. It is the courage to be permeable. To accept that to be alive is to be vulnerable. To let the world in, knowing it may bring pain, but also knowing with absolute certainty that it is the only way to also let in joy, connection, and meaning. The dark side of self-imposed isolation is not the loneliness. That is just a symptom. It is not the atrophy. That is just a consequence. The true darkness is the forgetting, the slow creeping amnesia of the soul, forgetting what a hand feels like, forgetting the nuance of a shared glance, forgetting the easy warmth of a familiar voice, forgetting in the gray, flat stillness of the room that the world outside is still in possession of color, of depth, of music. The open window is an act of remembering. It is the balance point. It is the acknowledgement that the self needs both. It needs the quiet room and the view. It needs the safety of the boundary and the life of the breeze. The human heart is not a fortress meant to be sealed, and it is not a marketplace meant to be always open. It is a home, and the mark of a home is not its impenetrable walls. It is the light and air that can move through it, the window that opens and closes and opens again, in the gentle, living rhythm of the day.